Welcome to this author interaction of the 2022 NLF Reading Challenge. My name is Karthika and I'm very excited to be here. We hope you are too. Before we begin the session, do allow me to give you a brief introduction about the NLF Reading Challenge, followed by a few housekeeping rules for today's session. The NLF Reading Challenge is a 4-month-long reading event from March to June 2022 for students between 10 to 13 years of age. It runs for students across India on the competitive and the non-competitive tracks. In addition to fun book-based activities and regular author interactions, the challenge will conclude with a quiz competition that will see the 3 best teams win gold, silver, and bronze engraved trophies respectively, certificates of achievement, and a great set of books. For today's event, please use the Q&A box to type out your questions or your responses to what's being discussed during the session. If you're a student, a teacher, or a school librarian, please mention the name of your school along with your question as well. Today, we are privileged to have with us the award-winning author, Holly Goldberg Sloan. As a writer of screenplays, Holly has penned 8 successful family feature films, 3 for the Walt Disney Company, including the baseball classic, Angels in the Outfield, and the soccer movie, The Big Green, which she also directed. Holly is also the author of several books for young readers, including the critically acclaimed Counting by Sevens, as well as the books I'll Be There, Apple Blossom, The Possum, and To Night Owl from Goldfish with Meg Wolitzer. Today, Holly is here to speak with us about her book, The Elephant in the Room, which tells the story of Sila Tekin, whose mother, a Turkish immigrant, has to live away from her family for an extended period of time. Sila's life changes when she meets an elephant named Veda and forges a friendship with the elephant scarer Gio Gardino, an elderly widower who won the lottery a few years ago. Welcome, Holly. We're very happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really liked your summation of the book. That was nice.
I really enjoyed reading it, so thank you for writing it.
Oh, thank you. The book.
Yes, yay. So, Holly, as we wait for the audience questions to come in, we'll ask you a few questions that we've come up with as the NLF team. And so one of the things that really struck us is the fact that the book features a third-person omniscient narrator. And so we as readers, we see what the characters are thinking about, what's happening with them. We also know, and these are not just the human characters, but we also know what's going on in Veda, the elephant's head, and Mr. Pickles, the bear's head. And you mentioned on your website that you're genuinely fond of animals, that there isn't a dog that you haven't found captivating. And so do you often find yourself wondering about what's going on? What are they thinking about? How are they processing the world? And is that why you decided to put their perspectives into the story as well?
Yes, that is why. There really is no animal I've ever met that I didn't fall in love with. Besides the movies that you spoke about, I also wrote the Crocodile Hunter movie with a man named Steve Irwin. And I would say the only animals I don't have a huge affinity for are reptiles. And yet I wrote a movie for the Crocodile Hunter that had snakes, alligators, crocodiles, all in the movie. So I spent a lot of time with them. Not going to say I ever got that close to them, but the truth is I learned to not be so afraid of them, even though I was bit in the face by an alligator at the premiere of the movie. You can go online and you can put in Holly Goldberg Sloan, alligator bite, crocodile bite, and you'll see a picture of me, which at the premiere, they asked me to hold a baby alligator, and I did, and I was squeezing it, and I tried to turn it because I was afraid of the tail, because the tail has all the power, and I thought the tail would slap and hit me in the face. So I turned it so much, and it was a movie premiere, and the photographers yelled, "Oh, it looks like you're going to kiss it. Go ahead and kiss it." So I just went like that, and it scared the poor little thing, and he jumped up, bit me right in the face, and then he tried to flip me over. I weighed more than he did. So he didn't flip me over, but I had 16 holes in my nose. And even that day, which involved an ambulance, and I did have to go to the hospital, I kept thinking about what that little alligator thought. He thought a giant picked him up and was going to eat him. So I guess maybe I always look for the other side. I always am wondering in a story, what other characters are thinking, not just the main characters, but so that's why I changed point of view. I write in different points of view.
Wow, that's a lot of empathy in a situation that was a security hazard.
Well, when it bit me, it wasn't the first thing I thought of, but the first thing I thought of when it bit me in the nose, truthfully, the first thing I thought was, oh, do I still have a nose? Because it hurt so much. I thought maybe he just bit off my nose. Right. But the first thing I said was, did you get the picture? Because I'm a professional. I'm working in Hollywood. Yes, they did get the picture. Right. It's everywhere. It's all over the internet.
Well, but that's an interesting way to think about what must have been going through his head. So
yes, I think they ran in and they grabbed him and they pulled him away, and they had a big pool of water, and they immediately put him back in the water. So I always think that for him, that day was about winning. He was picked up. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to leave the zoo. He didn't want this woman to pick him up. He bit her and he got back into the water. So it was a good day for him. Maybe not so good for me, but.
Right. Fair enough. So Holly, on this track of animals and how fond of them you are, I was also, while reading the book, something that also comes out very naturally is how you describe in great detail how what happens when you're spending time with an elephant. So right from the vessels and the food that the elephant requires to the sounds that an elephant can imitate, like when Veda imitates the sound of the golf cart. Those are things that you don't normally associate with elephants. And therefore, I'm guessing you must have done a great deal of research on this. I wrote an elephant movie.
Right. So what happened is, or I was one of the writers on an elephant movie. There are two very, very famous documentary filmmakers, and they're named the Joberts, Derek and Beverly Jobert, and they live in Botswana. And they filmed elephants for maybe 5 years living in the bush. And then they took all the footage back to Los Angeles, and the Walt Disney Company hired them to make a movie. And so what we did, and then they hired me to help them. So what we did is we would watch all the footage and then try to figure out how to tell a story it's all in reverse. It's not the way it works. You usually write a story and then you film it. They filmed stuff and then we made a story. Well, they are so accomplished and they know so much about animals, but I've watched hundreds of hours of footage of elephants. So, and I sort of, at the time, fell in love with them. I've spent time, and then I ended up going to Africa, and I've spent time with elephants. They're truly amazing animals, just their size, their intelligence. They live in a social setting. There are only very few animals, dolphins, chimpanzees, elephants, who make a family unit, a true family unit. And elephants, they mourn the dead. They're amazing.
Right. And Matthew says that he talks about all the other animals that have that are really intelligent and have connections with family and work as units like dolphins and chimpanzees. But one of the things that also struck us while we were reading the book is how therapeutic the connection is between elephants and all of the characters who are involved with Veda. And there's a sentence in the book where after Scylla met Veda, it's mentioned that the crush of missing her mother could be lifted by thinking of the elephant, that it was a big distraction and was the thing that had changed the color of every room. So was there something specific in terms of how therapeutic it could be to spend time with an elephant that drew you to bring an elephant into the story? And it also sort of ties in with Eka Shivramana, audience member's question of how did you come up with the title of the book?
Well, the title of the book is an expression. It's an expression many people know, the elephant in the room. It means many things. In a literal sense, is there an elephant in the room? But when you say the elephant in the room, it's the thing you're not speaking about. It's the big thing that is right in front of your face, but you don't want to talk about it. So this is a book about a girl who's missing her mother, but she doesn't tell her friends that at school. She stops seeing many of her friends. The elephant in the room is grief, it's loss, it's separation. Now, what was interesting was I wrote this book before the pandemic, before COVID, before the coronavirus. And the book is about being separated from people you love. And then when I published the book, we were in the middle of a worldwide pandemic where so many of us were separated from parents or grandparents, friends. We were separated from school. We were separated from work. We were separated from everything that we know that makes community. And for the first time, I did not go on a book tour because people weren't traveling and because kids weren't in school. Everyone was doing school virtually. And so the whole experience was different from me. Normally, I would publish a book. I would start in New York City, and then I would go across the country, across the United States. I would go 3,000 miles traveling from school to school, bookstores. I published a book and there was nowhere to go. It was a really crazy experience. I did some events at schools that were like this. There were Zooms, virtual events, but no one had read the book. So usually when I talk about my books, people have heard of them or they've read the book, and it's so much easier for me to talk about something where someone has a connection to it already. So I was in a very separate situation, and that's what the book is about. The book is about what it feels like to miss someone, what it feels, and it's not just the girl. The elephant is separated from the other elephants in the elephant's family and misses them as well. So I think because I traveled so much as a child, my father is a professor, but he helped start or work in the Peace Corps. And so I lived in Istanbul, Turkey. I lived in Holland. We traveled all around the world. And I think of the world as a much smaller place than most people because I've been so many places. So.
Yeah, one of the things that we were also thinking about was what was it like for you as a writer to have a book out during COVID, and now that the world is emerging from it. But thank you for telling us that. Can't have been easy.
We are emerging, and I'm going to Atlanta. I'm flying to Georgia on Sunday for the first time. I'm going someplace for work, and I don't know what it's going to be like because we keep changing it. In the United States, we keep changing everything. They'll say wear masks, don't wear masks. I've had 4 shots. I've had 2 shots and 2 boosters. I don't know. I keep thinking it's over, but I don't think it's really over yet. But I'm just hoping that we're coming to an end to it or a new understanding of it. I haven't had COVID, but I have 2 sons. One of them has had COVID. So many of my friends have. So
right. So
yeah.
I mean, it also ties in with something that's come up from some of our audience members, what you've just spoken about. So the fact that you used to travel a lot as a child, you've seen a lot of the world. We've been through this situation where we've been isolated, we've been separated, we experienced loss as a result of this global pandemic. There's also, it seems like it's also sort of breaking away from a way of life where everything was really leisurely, where you could take time to travel and experience places, people, cultures. And we're sort of moving away from that with all of the work that we're doing on screen. And so one of the audience members' questions from Tripti Khandelwal is, how do you think we could, and this is for you as a writer, as a parent, as somebody who works with film and screens, how do you think we could push children to read for pleasure in times like COVID, when there's so much screen time and technology and gadgets that overrun their life, or that is such a dominant presence in their life? And also in terms of the fact that, do you feel like we're moving further away from just a ways of living and leisure that maybe you had experienced as a child, and feels like there's too much going on now for us to process it in the times that we're living in?
Well, this last 2 years has been difficult. And at the same time, I don't ever want to lose track of the fact that even in bad times, there are good things that even come out of that. So in the United States, more people are reading books than before. So that is a curious thing. Maybe in the beginning, because there were so many things we could not do, but maybe also because many people are reading books together. I know a lot of families that read a book together, and a lot of schools that they'll have one school, one book. And if you do an event, a one school, one book, it's hard to pick a book that would work for kindergarten, for 5-year-olds, and all the way up to, say, 10, 11, and 12. But you can find those books. And everyone reads the book. The parents read the book. The teachers read the book. The people that work in the cafeteria read the book. The idea is to have one conversation. The idea is that everyone is doing the same thing for it's a short period of time, but for the younger kids, they're having the book read to them. For the older kids, they're reading it themselves. Some kids are just listening to the book. But there are ways to build community around books. And one of them you guys are doing, because you have a reading challenge. And a reading challenge is one way to do it, is to say, how many books can you read in that amount of time? Now, the thing about reading is, for pleasure or for school, reading is a habit. And I think that you should encourage good habits and somewhat discourage bad habits. So if you get in the habit of getting ready to go to bed, not looking at your phone, and picking up a book, and whether you read, maybe it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but you do that every night, that's your habit. That's what you do before you fall asleep. I try to do that. My mother is 93 and she's downstairs. She lives with us and she listens to audiobooks. That's her habit. Sometimes we are reading the same book. And again, it gives us a conversation we can have. It's the thing that's bringing us together. Stories are really problems, right? They're problems presented through characters that hopefully have many ways to come into to connect to it. And those, I try to write about problems that are, because I write contemporary realistic fiction, I want to write about problems that people see around us and then talk about solutions. So my book is in part about immigration. My book is about neurodifferences. One of the characters is on the spectrum. My book is about animal rights. My book is about parenting. How do you parent when one parent is gone? Those are things you can talk about as a community if everyone's reading one thing. So I'm not sure I answered that question, but
no. That was lovely. Thank you. Thank you for that. Absolutely. I think it's given all of us room for thought on what can we do as a community and as parents and as teachers, as librarians, to help our children read more, read better, and read deep.
So reading is a commitment. It's a commitment. But I think that we have been bombarded with screens this last couple of years, but we also have had some quiet in our lives that we didn't have because there have not been events. Here in the United States, the movie theaters closed. There's so many. I live a block from the beach. And the crazy thing in the beginning of the pandemic was we didn't really understand how it was transmitted. And so they actually closed the beach. Now that is so crazy because being outside is one of the few things that you can do and feel safe about. But back then they didn't know. So they closed the beach, they closed the parks, and the kids couldn't go play. Did they do that in India?
Yeah, we were locked down, completely locked down for a bit. Now things are opening up.
And everyone was inside and there were no restaurants, of course. And yet there are some things, a kind of community, even on my own street, the neighbors, we would go outside and sort of stand at a distance talking to each other. Normally we're all so busy that we don't have time for things like that. And so many people, I love animals. So many people on my street decide to adopt a dog or adopt a cat. They had time in their life to take on something new, learn something new. 2 of my friends started playing guitar. Another friend started trying to learn how to paint. My son's tried to learn to cook a little better. So I don't know. We'll look back on it. I think you don't really know how something's affected you until not just it's over, but until you can look back, until you have some perspective on it. And we don't have that yet because we're still in the middle of it, still going through it.
Absolutely. Something else that really stands out from your books, Holly, and from the story itself of Elephant in the Room, is how you champion diversity and how you celebrate difference. So there's Matteo and Scylla, who are sort of on the fringes of the mainstream. They're not in all of the conversations in their school. But similarly with your other books as well, you have children who are protagonists and who are not conventional and they don't sort of go with the crowd. They sort of stand out. And over the course of the story, they sort of find themselves and they see themselves as valuable and see themselves as strong. So this idea of celebrating or redefining how normal is looked at and sort of broadening and deepening that definition, is that something that you do subconsciously as a writer to champion difference?
I think so. My most successful book is Counting by Sevens, and that is absolutely about a difference. It's about a girl who is very gifted academically. At the same time, she has social struggles because of her differences, because she's very, very bright, and she loses her parents. I think the book is having a lot of humor, but when I describe it, it's about a little girl, she's adopted and she loses her parents. That sounds only like it's going to be tragic, but that's not what it is for me. It's about looking at differences, which all of us have, and recognizing our strengths and our weaknesses and coming together for each other. It's about being there for each other. I truly believe the way to make our culture and our planet more empathetic is empathy needs to be shown. It needs to be taught. You aren't just born caring about other people. You need to care about other people because you're taught that, you're shown that. And when you're shown the opposite, when you're only shown hostility, when you're only shown aggression, you become aggressive and you become more hostile. So that's part of what's so important about stories, is that from a story, a young person can identify with an animal, with a character, with a setting, with a problem, and work out their own issues through somebody else's. That's maybe one of the most important reasons we read, is to try to understand the world. And we live in such a complicated world, a world that provides so many daily challenges to us, that reading is the answer. It's the solution. It's what activates our imagination. It's what activates our minds. It's what makes our heart bigger. Anyway.
That's a lovely thing for us to think about. I'm sure all of us in the audience who already like reading sort of affirms why we do it. So thank you for that.
Yeah. It's very hard. I was on a book tour in England, and I went to all over the country, and I went to a very small school, and I was talking about reading and why reading was important and why it was necessary to do it. And a little boy in the back, he raised his hand and he stood up and he said, Miss, you say that if I'll read, it will change my life. But I hate reading and I don't want to read and I don't know what to do. And I told him, I want you to not think about reading from the beginning as a book. You can read a magazine, a page of a magazine. You can read a newspaper, a cartoon, a graphic novel. I just want you to take words and use the words to make your imagination work. You don't have to start by saying, I'm going to get a big shelf of books. You just told me you don't like it. what you have to commit to is trying it. You have to commit to, if I gave you a guitar, you wouldn't know how to play it in the beginning. But if you every day picked up your guitar, you'd learn. And I said, so you don't like reading right now, but a year from now, you might really love to read. And afterwards, I was leaving the school and he chased me out of the school before I was getting. They had a car waiting to take me away. And he chased me out of school and he said, I'm going to start today, miss. And it was so sweet. I don't know if he did, but I like to hope that everybody, again, reading is a good habit. Everybody can get in the habit of doing something that maybe they don't have any affinity for. It's not something, maybe it was always a struggle, but there are other ways to read, and audiobooks are fantastic and graphic novels are wonderful. And so.
Yeah, thank you for that. All the different ways to read. Thanks for that, Holly. I hope that boy read as well, and let's hope he's still reading now.
That was at that same school, because pretty much I go so many different places and the questions people ask me are often similar. But at that same school, a little boy raised his hand. He was really excited to ask me a question. And his question was, do you like cheese? I do like cheese. So I guess we had to just a burning question, like, please call on me, please. Do you like cheese?
All right, Holly, thanks so much for sharing that. We're 2 minutes away for closing, so I think we will squeeze in one last question. And this is a question from a children's book writer in India, Varsha Session, who is a big fan of your work. She says that you've written one of her all-time favorite books, and that also that you've written several films with other writers, along with co-authoring a book with Meg Wolitzer. What has the experience of writing with someone else been like for you?
Well, I did write a book, an epistolary novel, which is a novel told in letters, and in our case, email. And one of the things about that book, the entire book, is email going back and forth between two characters. And when Meg and I we've traveled all around to talk about the book, and we say it's a great assignment to pair up two kids, ask them to email each other, send letters to each other. And the start is that one person, which is how our book starts, presents a problem to the other person, and the other person just has to answer. And from that, you can get a story. And that's actually how we wrote the book. Meg wanted to know she lives in New York, I live in Los Angeles. She said, we should work together because we're really good friends. And so she said, let's try to write a book together. I came into this room. My husband was here in the morning. And I said, Meg keeps saying we should write a book together. I don't know how to do that. How do two writers sit down and write together? And my husband's reading the paper and he says, why don't you just start by emailing each other? But he meant email about character, plot. He meant email to start an outline, but I didn't understand. So I thought he meant, write a book by emailing her. So I wrote her an email and the subject heading is, you don't know me. And the body of the email starts out, you don't know me, but I live in Los Angeles and my father's making me go to summer camp and he's going to make you go to summer camp too. You should say no, because I don't want to go to summer camp and I don't want to meet you. And so I send off this email and my phone buzzes and I look and Meg goes, what did you just send me? What are you doing? Why would you write, you don't know me? And I text back to her, I'm starting a story. We're writing a story together. Just answer me. And that's what she did. She answered me. We had in our minds this movie, The Parent Trap, which we really liked, and about girls and going to camp. And we wrote a whole book. It was almost like improvisation, like acting, where you don't stop, where we would write each other. We would introduce characters that the other one had never seen or heard of. And Meg kept calling me and going, we have to talk about it. We can't just keep doing this. We have to discuss it. And I would be like this, I don't want to talk about it. Just write me an email. And that's how we did the book. And it was great fun. And Disney Plus has bought our book and they're going to make a movie out of it. So we're pretty excited about that. And we talk all the time about whether we would do something like that again. I don't think we would ever do it with so much spontaneity, but we did the first time. So it's a great assignment. You pair up kids, you tell them to write each other with a problem, and whatever they write each other back and forth becomes your story.
Oh, that's lovely. We can't wait to watch the movie either when it comes out.
Yeah.
Well, Holly, this has been an incredible half hour. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for supporting books. And I was really happy and honored to be part of it this year. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly. Wish you all the very best with all your new work.